Every week we talk about how the Russia has a much stronger position going into any discussions about a ceasefire or resolution of the war, whatever to stop the bloodshed. Um, they have said repeatedly over the course of the last week, as we fast approach this meeting to try to resolve the conflict with Donald Trump in several days, that we're not giving up the land that we've got. We demand some concessions on land. We demand that Ukraine be precluded from entering NATO. I mean, it's the same line in the sand that Putin's been drawing from the day one, only to get in response from Zelensky and apparently the European Union, no, we're not going to concede land and we're not going to give up the possibility of Ukraine entering NATO. So we're at this stalemate. Well, things have just gotten better for the Russians as we move forward to this meeting this weekend. Let my listeners know what's going on in the eastern region. Daniel Davis.
Yeah, there has been a continued stalemate in the political realm, but in the military realm, it is far from that. And in fact, there has been some pretty major developments in about the last 48 hours where there has been a major penetration of the Ukraine lines by the Russian forces north of a city called Pokrovsk. They've been going after this for quite some time. We've been mentioning, I think, several of our conversations we've had in recent months that this is something Russia has been moving closer and closer towards. But now then it appears that they have a major breakthrough where they have moved in 36 hours about 20 kilometers deep and now about 7 kilometers wide. They're expanding their bridgehead. And the reason is because Ukraine simply doesn't have enough men. That's been a theme you and I've talked about for a long time. Now it's actually manifesting in a really powerful way because Russia, many of the trench lines that they went up to, and they've got video showing this, there simply weren't any Ukrainians manning them. Defensive lines were good. They were certainly capable of doing the job, but there weren't enough troops to man them. So now Russia has penetrated through those lines, gotten behind some of them, and now then they're extending deep and wide into the to the last major line of Ukraine defense. This is similar to what Ukraine was trying to do in 2023 when they wanted to penetrate the Russian lines of defense, make a breach, and then put troops in to get all the way down to the Azov coast. They never made it past the first one because Russians' defensives and their manpower were sufficient to repel that. Now then the situation in reverse, Ukraine doesn't have the number of troops, and if Russia continues to exploit this right here, there are no defensive belts in the remainder of the interior of the country. And if Russia has the forces and crucially the logistics to be able to back this up, they could continue to roll as far as they can drive because Ukraine simply doesn't have the manpower to stop them. Now, Ukraine does recognize, how critical this is, and according to all the sources I can ascertain this morning, they're literally throwing in the kitchen sink. They're using all their strategic reserves, the Azov Brigade. They're pulling folks from other portions of the front to try and stop it. But here's the problem, Brian. They don't have fortifications in this area, so they're going to be fighting in the open, which means that's going to give the advantage to Russia. Russia accomplished this by a combination of drones, of course, troops on the ground, mainly infantry, not armor so far. But the glide bombs have been a huge issue. The artillery, they have just been saturating these areas, making the thin lines even more brittle. And now then we've seen a major break, and it's unclear if Ukraine can stop this. And coming literally days before this Trump-Putin meeting here, I mean, if anybody was ever looking for political leverage, at the highest levels, this is certainly providing it, and it just almost shreds any kind of hope that Trump can go in there and do what the Europeans are going to ask him to do tomorrow. There's a big meeting between the heads of state and Trump on a phone call to try to convince him not to, quote, give away the store. But there may be nothing to, quote, give away because the Russians are simply taking it. This is the deepest penetration Russia's had in 2 years of fighting and could come at a time when it signals this war could be coming to an end. It's not going to happen overnight, but this could prove to be the pivot point that sees this war come to an end, either negotiations or through a Ukraine loss.
Well, in terms of conceding land, obviously Russia now is controlling a bigger chunk of land. Is this Pokrovsk region? Is this one of those areas that's predominantly Russian leaning, like we had with Crimea, where they could make a legitimate claim because, hey, these are Russian people. They would rather be affiliated and under the leadership of Russia as opposed to Ukraine. We're taking that area. Other areas of Ukraine are more independent. Folks don't perceive themselves as to be Russian. So how about this particular region and this new area that they've taken over?
It's a mix, but there is still a significant portion that's ethnic Russian, and there is all the way to the Dnieper River. And what the Russians call Novorossiya, which is I think eight oblasts. They're the first eight instead of the four that have currently been annexed. There's about eight up to the river. That importantly includes some of the area where Odessa is in the south, which is beyond the Dnieper River. So there's a lot of area there that includes a lot of ethnic Russians, and certainly they would welcome this. But there's lots of others who are not ethnic Russians who are fearing it.
Well, what do you expect to happen this weekend, Daniel Davis? I mean,
Well,
is this a moment of clarity for everybody in the European Union? I mean, interestingly enough, J.D. Vance just said the other day, was yesterday, we're done funding the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. He said, we're not going to pay for these arms anymore. The European Union wants to do it, fine. But you painted a scenario that even if the European Union showed up today with a whole bunch of arms, there aren't enough men to use the arms to fight back the Russians. So are we going to have a moment of clarity this weekend when they're all going to wake up and say, you know what, Vladimir Putin's hand is a lot stronger than ours. We don't have anything to bargain with. We're going to have to start cutting up Ukraine.
Brian, if there was going to be a moment of clarity, that it would have already come. These information, this fundamentals have been there almost from the beginning, and I've been beating my head against the wall. So if there was a moment of clarity, they would have already gotten it. So I honestly doubt even now they'll have it. And in fact, some of the statements I've seen in just the last 24 hours shows that a lot of the European leaders are still oblivious to this and just, no. We just need more stuff. We just need the U.S. to give us more interceptor missiles or artillery pieces, whatever, fill in the blank. They just aren't willing to. So I don't think even this will provide clarity. I think the only thing that could provide clarity is if you see Russian mechanized formations exploiting this penetration, and instead of just infantrymen who are limited by how fast you can, move to walk to portions of the front, they could then, once they have it broad enough, they can drive in. And now then you could see not tens of kilometers falling per day, but hundreds of kilometers falling per day. Then you might get a moment of clarity where they realize, oh, snap, we either end this now or we could lose everything to the Dnieper River and possibly beyond, which is very much a real concern.
Well, and let's assume that's going to happen because that's what seems to be going on. Every week we talk about it. Russia improves its hand. They seem to be in a collective state of denial, obviously. So if Russia does go all the way to the river and they get all the land that they're hoping to get and they accomplish that, they bring the tanks in, they roll forward quicker. I suppose, will Russia be able to hold it? You and I have talked about the concept of an ongoing, long-term, protracted, like guerrilla warfare. The Ukrainians will take to the hills, whoever's left, and constantly pester and shoot and attack the Russians in a piecemeal fashion, never giving them any peace whatsoever. Can the Russians maintain control over that region once they have control of it?
They seem to think they can, and that's the answer is really unanswerable right now.
Yeah.
We can only project, but the Russians apparently are aware of that, have considered that, and are prepared for that. And they apparently will want to hold on to areas where it is mostly ethnic Russian. And look, I'm not going to defend this, but I'm just going to say that I would guess, and no one's told me this, but knowing history, I would suggest that if they take this area up to the Dnieper, they'll probably expel any population that is not pro-Russian, that doesn't want them. You'll see a version of ethnic cleansing, just like we did in World War II in several places, in the ugly aftermath of that fight. It happened when the Germans were moving forward. They ethnically cleansed areas, and when the Soviets came through, especially in Eastern Europe, they did the same things. And so I unfortunately would expect something like that to happen because Russia doesn't want to get into a situation like you described, so that they will try to clear it out. And they still expect, though, that there would be some they said, one source I've talked to said there's a 5-year plan post the end of this conflict where they expect to have to find that, and then over time it'll peter out, which matches what we also saw in the post-World War II area where the Soviets had a lot of that, especially in Hungary and Yugoslavia and some other areas. We saw that, and it took 4 or 5 years to peter out before it finally did, and it looks like the Russians are prepared for that.
Well, we can't have a long-term discussion on it, but that sounds to me, if I can draw a parallel and link this over, because we haven't talked about Israel, Gaza, looks like Israel's going in and just going to completely try to, not say ethnically cleanse, but basically try to throw everybody out of Gaza as a strategy now.
Well, I mean, it is, and you can use whatever term you want to, but the net on the ground it appears the same, that they're trying to physically force everybody, all the 2 point whatever million are still left, and move them into the southern part of the strip, which is just like putting sardines in a can. And I don't know if you've seen any of these pictures recently, but it's nothing but fields of tents and just lean-tos and just, I mean, not even official tents, just tarps and whatever else they can get, all in the rubble because there's nowhere to live. And that's not sustainable. You can't do that. It's not even at this point a matter so much of making sure you get enough food aid in, although that's obviously required to keep people from starving to death. But you can't sustain that. You can't live that way. So either Israel's going to have to relent and allow people back into other areas and spread them out and then rebuild, or somebody else is going to have to take them to go out. Otherwise, you'll probably literally start getting large scale die-offs. And I just, it's a horrible, horrible humanitarian situation. I don't see a good military outcome or a political outcome for Israel. I think they've kind of boxed themselves into a position, even if people are very much pro-Israel. I mean, militarily speaking, this is not sustainable, and it's not going to bring peace to Israel. And I don't know what Netanyahu government's going to do.
Wow.